Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar we've had in quite some time. I'm not going to pretend like I know the numbers of where we're at in terms of number of webinars we've done, but I am Phil Schuman. I'm the Director of Financial Literacy for Indiana University, and I'm also the co-chair for the Higher Education Financial Wellness Summit. We appreciate everybody taking the time to come in today and learn more about what we've got going on with our webinar series. First thing, happy Halloween. If anybody is like me, you've already gone through your kids' candy, pulled out the peanut M&Ms, taken them for yourself, and you may or may not be eating them during this webinar. That being said, feel free to enjoy whatever candy you would like during this. Just make sure you keep yourself on mute during this so we can let our presentation, or we can let our presenters do their thing. What we obviously want to do here is just kind of promote the summit. Next year, we're going to be here in lovely Bloomington, Indiana, where you can't see that it's currently 55 degrees and raining like mad, but I promise you in the summertime next year, it'll be much nicer. We'll be here July 14th through the 16th next year at lovely Indiana University here in Bloomington, Indiana. We'll have more information coming up in the next few weeks about registration, about call for proposals, keynotes, all those things. So if you're worried that you've missed something, you haven't. We've all just kind of been doing our own thing for a while, and we'll be getting back in the swing of things here very soon. The other thing to note too is this Friday is the closing deadline for the student experience applications. So basically, if you have students on your campus that want to help promote financial wellness, we are trying to bring them to the summit next year and are doing a one-day intensive session the day before the summit begins. To kind of catch them up to speed, help them figure out exactly what they can be doing on their campus, or on your campus, to help promote financial wellness. We are working to make it so that all expenses will be included, so please apply. If you're a sponsor and you're interested in helping bring students here, please contact us as well at info@hefwa.org. So just check out more information if you want to know more about the webinars. We'll have the recording posted after this is over. It'll be at www.hefwa.org. If you want to learn more about the summit, it's going to be at www.hefwa2019.org. But really, we just want to thank you all for joining us and being a part of this, and especially thank you for accommodating us with the emergency we had a couple weeks ago. We appreciate you just being flexible and being here today. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Jimena Huaco, who's just going to kind of go over some of the logistics for you all. I probably have to unmute her too.
Thank you, Phil.
Oh, no, I don't. There we go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining in on this webinar. My name is Jimena Huaco. I work at Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont, and I'm a member of the advisory group at HEFWA. And before we introduce our presenters today, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So if you are able, please make sure that you stay muted, as Phil said, throughout the webinar. I will be monitoring the group chat in the background, so please feel free to submit your questions as they come through. As you think of them, just send them in either to me or to everyone in the chat group, and I will gather them all, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. And if we don't have time to get all your questions answered during the quick Q&A, we'll make sure to answer them in a follow-up email. So please feel free to keep those questions coming throughout in the chat group. And if you're having any trouble or technical issues, also please feel free to contact me through the chat group. But other than that, I think that will be it. So I will hand it off to Brian here, who will introduce our presenters. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Brian Ashton. I serve as the Vice President of Community Investment at Trellis, but also as the co-chair with Phil for the Higher Education Financial Wellness Summit. We're really, really excited about our webinar today. And a lot of that excitement, in addition to the content area, is driven by the great and fabulous presenters that we have today. And so want to introduce Laura Keene, who is the Chief Policy Officer at uAspire. Laura leverages her frontline experience to put students at the center of institutional, state, and federal policies. She works to make financial aid more equitable and efficient in order to help more low-income students complete their degree with less debt. We also are joined by Bob Collins, who joined Western Governors University in October of 2012 as the Vice President of Financial Aid. Bob has over 35 years of experience in student aid administration and continues to be active at the state, regional, and national level through professional associations. In 2016, Western Governors University received national recognition for its responsible borrowing initiatives, or RBI program, that helped to reduce student loan debt by nearly 40% with a simple business process change. Collins is a member of the NASFA Forward 50 committee and is serving as a thought leader in that role on higher education, public policy, and in many other roles as well. And so I've had the opportunity to know both Bob and Laura, and am very, very excited for the information that they have today. And so without any further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to them.
Make sure my screen is being shared in 1 second here. Here we go. Oops. Apologies, folks. There we go. All right, hopefully you all are able to see our screen today. So we're going to start off with a couple quick framing slides that Bob and I will comment on. Then uAspire will lead part of the beginning, and Bob will come in with WGU's items to share following up. So first off is just framing around how financial aid and financial literacy connect. So in conversations, we really believe that the framing is throughout the entire financial aid experience for students. So first off, it's really financial literacy and know-how, and it's the knowledge base around terms and concepts. And that kind of grows into students' financial capabilities regarding their skills and behaviors, such as paying bills on time and doing budgeting activities and planning. And lastly, that really culminates in ultimately their financial wellness, which is represented by healthy financial outcomes, such as their ability to make choices around what jobs they want and or hopefully engaging in home ownership and other healthy financial behaviors and managing their loan debt successfully. So this is just something important to keep in mind, given how our focus today will be heavily around some financial aid elements, but how it fits into the broader spectrum. Bob, do you want to chime in anything else on this slide before we move on?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. There's probably more refined definitions of financial literacy and financial wellness. Some of these may be interchangeable, but as Laura and I were preparing for this webinar, we just kind of put this together as a framing to help, help this audience understand where we're coming from. And really it's understanding the knowledge base and then the actions and decisions of the capabilities, and it really dramatically affects the outcomes, and we want them to be healthy financial outcomes, right? So that's our framing.
Absolutely. And then one other piece to kind of give context before we dive into specific context is about the traditional financial aid timeline. And Bob will also share some comments about the more typical student financial aid timeline as well. So first off, students are getting flooded by communication these days from all types of different departments on campus. And that happens throughout the year, whether it's email, text, et cetera, you name it. So it really is a bit of a fire hydrant of communications. And so we really try to keep in mind the experience or the life cycle of the student. And for uAspire, dominantly many of our students are traditional age and they go to a whole variety of institutions, but this is the kind of timeline of experience, both for new students entering post-secondary world and continuing post-secondary students. And something that we focus a lot of our work on, as well as in the supporting institutions, is about how to do student-centered communication. And what that's really about is providing the right information at the right time in the right way, so that it can inform the students' action and behaviors to really support their healthy decision-making when it comes to managing their financial life and their financial obligations with their post-secondary experience.
Yeah, if I might chime in here, Laura, this is the calendar that you have mapped out there. It's, the FAFSA renewal happens every, 1st of October, right? So you can begin to start filling out your FAFSA with using prior year income. It gets to start the process early. So this is the traditional financial aid timeline, where you might be reviewing your award letter as high school seniors, reviewing your award letter in March, and making decisions in the summer to attend next fall. at Western Governors University, we serve a non-traditional student. So we have, you'll see later on in my presentation, we have starts that begin new students beginning and ending every month. So we have a continuous enrollment, and we operate on non-standard terms. So reviewing award letter, that happens every day for our students at WGU. So just a little slightly different perspective.
Absolutely. That's important to keep in mind, given many of you are coming from all types of institutions. So we just wanted to anchor in again where student-centered communication is happening, and really for you thinking about where it's the right information at the right time in the right way for students to be able to base their decisions on strong information. So hopping in, just very quickly, who is uAspire, in case this might be the first time you've heard of our organization. We're a national nonprofit that's hyper-focused on college affordability, and we support low-income students to earn more degrees with less debt. So we're relentlessly student-focused. We serve about 10,000 students a year, both in high school and in the post-secondary space, dominantly in Massachusetts and California, but also virtually in New York and some other states as well. We also train practitioners, which we started about 5 years ago, leveraging a lot of the training we give our own staff and the tools to make a very complex process more accessible and easier to manage. And then lastly, just beginning around 2 years ago, our board asked us to start thinking about our lessons learned from the front line and how we could offer that as systems change solutions that are student forward. So that's a relatively new space for us. So that's a little bit of where this work that I'm sharing with you today has come from. So the focus of what we'll share today is from a recent report that we released with our research partner, New America, who's a think tank located in DC. And our focus was on doing quantitative and qualitative analysis of about 11,000 award letters from the class of 2016. And we focused both quantitatively on the aid that was provided, and then we did quite a deep qualitative review as well. So hopping into this, why do transparent aid letters matter? Number one, something we talk about in all of our practice with students and families is you should celebrate when you get accepted, but decide after you review award letters. And again, this is for our high school population. And this is because the majority of students aren't really deciding where to go at that emotional I got in moment. They really are needing to do important financial analysis, given the size and scope of what a financial investment looks like these days for college for the majority of Americans. And currently, there's no federal policy that exists to require standard terms in terms of what is communicated, nor standard formatting practices in terms of how that information is communicated. And we have seen firsthand in working with students year over year how very poor communication of this actually leads to detrimental financial health in the long term. In terms of our data set, again, we had about 11,000 award letters from 900 unique colleges, almost a national set from 47 states, and just shy of 6,000 students. We source these letters through one-on-one conversations with students, both ourselves with our own students through uAspire advisors, and through those training partners we have who work with us to gather data on this so that they can better advise financial fit to their students on the ground. So the qualitative look is definitely different than our quantitative look, just to be clear. So we started out with those 910 institutions, but then because we removed those letters who were not for Pell eligible students, any institution who used the shopping sheet, as well as different portal screenshots that we thought might be incomplete, we then worked with just 515 letters for doing the deep qualitative dive. The quantitative findings are pretty easy to summarize. The gap persists, no matter where students go or how they're able to navigate the process. So if you look at this graph, you can see that the gray amount is what the gap is, what students are left to come up with on their own. And this is after the dark blue bar, which is loans. So this is after the loans are applied, the gap that still remains. And you can see if you look from across the graph to the right side, you can see that even if students make different affordability-based decisions, such as living off campus, or staying with a public in-state school, or going to a less competitive and perhaps cheaper school, the gap remains. And even though the 15% in the last final column is the smallest, that percent actually usually represents a much larger dollar amount because those are more exclusive private colleges with an overall higher price tag. So the reason why we share this information is because it's really critical how the communication exists because the gaps are real. And so we know they're facing real financial risk in what decisions students make. That said, we are really about how to work on reducing those gaps for students, but the rest of the focus of what we talk about today will be on that communication element. So overall, what we'll focus on for the remaining part of my time with you today is on our qualitative findings. And ultimately, it's a total hodgepodge. We just found that there is a total lack of transparency for students to be able to understand this information. And this lack of transparency, again, really has a detrimental effect in the quality of the decisions they can make. As consumers making a really important financial decision, this really is what we think unacceptable in the field today, and we think there needs to be changes. So diving into those 7 findings, first off is confusing jargon and terminology. So through conversation after conversation, students and families are absolutely scratching their heads. And it's impossible to compare one letter to another for those students who are new to financial aid and to entering the post-secondary space. So examples of this, number one, is that there's insider lingo and acronyms littered throughout, which might be very normal to those of us who are heavily familiar with financial aid, but it's not normal for students and families who are just entering this space. So one example of that is SEOG, which if we were in the room, I'd do a quick quiz, maybe throw some Halloween candy at you for the winner. The Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, really important word there for students and families, is grant. Another example are that different terms are used for the same things. So we found that there were 136 unique titles and listings for the federal direct unsubsidized loan. 136 different titles. In the report, if you care to see it, we printed every single one. And 24 of these did not include the word loan. And on the right here, we share an example of one of those award letters that does not include the word loan. You can see that our assumption is that oftentimes it's technology and things that limit characters. Despite that, we still believe a loan should always be called a loan. Another thing in terms of terminology that you can refer to back in the report are many terms that are really confusing for students and families. We find ourselves repeating explanations of these terms over and over and over again. And as we've talked with financial aid administrators, they have found similar experiences. So for example, unmet need, it is a federal definition and an important term. However, to students and families and understanding what they owe, it is very difficult. No one has a separate fund where their unmet need account is with that dollar figure available. And so for them, they really want to understand what is the amount they need to cover, what are the bills they need to pay. So unmet need at EFC doesn't easily translate to a student and family audience as one example. Our second finding is that oftentimes it's just missing a price tag. So literally a third of the letters that we encountered completely omit the cost anywhere on the letter. So it only includes aid offered, but not what to subtract that aid from. In terms of what we think should happen is that both the billable direct costs to the institution should be included, as well as the indirect expenses, the non-billable expenses the student needs to be able to finish their degree for a year. And so in this space, again, without having the cost, literally it's impossible for students and families to understand what it is that they'll owe. Here's an example of one of the groups in the middle third, who did provide direct costs, but not indirect expenses. And as you can see in the first circle on the left, it shows very clearly tuition fees and room and board for that full direct cost. However, on the left where it says total estimated budget, we found students very confused by this. Because when they're thinking a budget, it means something of what they will need to cover for the full year. And that might include transportation and books, etc. The third finding was that there was a failure to differentiate types of aid. So 7 out of 10 letters lumped grants and loans together. And again, many of our students are entering this space as freshmen for the first time. And so distinguishing what a grant is and a loan is especially when sometimes the terms do not include the words grant or loan, is extremely difficult and then leads to poor decisions. We found that really only 1 in 5 letters from our research actually separated the aid under clear types. And we believe there's 3 types of aid that should be separated by type. 1 are grants and scholarships, which do not need to be repaid. Loans, which is money that needs to be repaid over time with interest. And then work, money earned over time. Here's an example of that in action. And once again, if we were in class, I would say, hey, what's happening here on the letter? Who can notice how this institution organized their aid communication? And I'm guessing many of you are saying alphabetical, and you're right. So while alphabetical might make a lot of sense for a database, it does not make sense for students and families to be able to inform their decisions. Another one of our findings is the misleading packaging of PLUS loans. Parent PLUS loans, I know, can get to be a bit of a technical area in terms of financial aid, but it's really essential for how communication of the aid is occurring. So number 1, Parent PLUS loans are different because they are for the parent. They are not to the student. This is assuming that students have parents that either have the interest and or ability to be able to contribute to their higher education. Number 2, a Parent PLUS loan requires an additional application. So this is not money that is available to the student. It's money that might be available to the student. And hence, that is a very essential distinction in terms of how it's communicated. Third, Parent PLUS loans include higher risk, both in the sense it's a much higher origination fee at over 4%, and also in that there are not as many repayment options that are available to students later on as they need to manage payback. So in our analysis, we found that 15% of aid offers actually included PLUS loans as a line item award and totaled it in their aid package. And we found that only 12% actually made clear communication of what the Parent PLUS loan is and when and how it might be accessed. This is an example of an institution that did what we think is a misleading packaging of the PLUS loan. So if you look at the top of the arrow, you can see that it mentions about $19,500 and change as a federal direct PLUS loan offered. Commend that it says loan and offered, but it does not mention parent here. And then if you follow with the arrow down to the bottom, it does note that it's a 0 unmet need. And so what happens in our experience is students see this letter and they think that they have all of their needs met. It's not clear to them, since there's a zeroing out, that this in fact does involve additional loans that are not necessarily available and that have to be going to a parent versus the student. Another similar finding is related to work study. Once again, there are conditions on work study. It's really different than other aid offered, such as grants and loans. So number 1, even the term can be confusing. We've had many students that think that it's a grant because they're going to work hard studying, which is a very reasonable understanding from looking at different aid offers. So it's really important to us to actually think about the terms job or employment as connected to whenever work study is listed. So as we all know, it's a requirement that it must be earned money. And as a result, this is money that will trickle in during the time that the student works, not necessarily available to pay the bill. And last, it is not a lump sum. So again, the trickling in of the funds make it really a great support for indirect expenses that are ongoing during the year, but make it really difficult to assume that it could be used to pay bills. And we found that 6 out of 10 institutions were listing it as an award. And what happens in our work is that we see students then have struggled to pay bills in the summer, and we see this as a key part of summer melt, because sometimes it can be small amounts of money that inhibit students with their ability to enroll and or to complete their degrees. Our 6th finding is that there's very inconsistent bottom line calculations. And ultimately, in every conversation that we have with students and families, what they want to know is what's it going to cost? That's the question. And we found that 60% of the letters that we looked at are not doing the math to show the students what they need to pay. There's no calculations at all. There's just itemized lists of sometimes costs, often grants or scholarships and loans, but ultimately figuring out what do I need to pay is not available. This is really problematic because of the 40% that did list the calculation, we actually found 23 different ways that they did the math. So again, it's very difficult to compare. So it's extremely confusing. We spend much of our time as kind of the geeks that look at thousands of these award letters. We often take a long time to even figure out how the math is done. And we found many more calculations than the 23, but we actually couldn't figure out what was the math that the institution was doing. So we recognize that this is a really difficult question for the field, and which math to do could be difficult. And in our report, we talk about the importance of showing both what we call an estimated bill, so what is going to be the cost to owe the institution to start being a student, as well as what is the all-in cost for a year of successfully completing school, which are the net costs. And we do think students and families need to understand both of those calculations. Here's an example of a misleading calculation of net costs. It starts with the cost of attendance, then it goes through gift aid, self-help, and then different aspects of credit-based aid, and then lands at a net cost after all aid of 0. And again, this is an example of students or families thinking that they have it all covered and it's all taken care of, when in fact is absolutely not covered. This includes over $40,000 of different self-help and loans. Finally, our last thing was about how there were no clear next steps. So all of this aid is offered, but it's not applied to the student's account until those critical next steps are completed. And we've learned that institutions have a whole variety of ways to complete those next steps. And only about half of the letters actually articulate them about how to access the aid that is offered on that award letter. This is really important so that students can access the aid offered and make sure that they can transition from this timeline into enrolling in school successfully. One thing we are aware of is that we found that many times schools are accepting loans on behalf of the students, and we do think that that's a practice worth taking a second look at. So in wrapping up, I'll just conclude from the uAspire segment before passing it over to Bob about what uAspire's policy recommendations are. And we really see policy, I think, as a small p, so this can be something for institutions to consider, as well as state and the federal government. So number one, absolutely, we believe there should be a written financial aid offer to all qualified students. And when we say written, we mean whether that's electronic or in paper. We recognize that portal communication and email is really important today as well. Secondly, and something we're currently working on very much with different stakeholders, is the need to employ standardized terms and student-friendly definitions. There are many glossaries out there, oftentimes 10 pages long with full paragraphs of terms, and many times they don't match. So we're in the process of doing an audit of those terms and working with others to come up with, again, a set of clear standard terms and student-friendly definitions. Number three, every offer should include the cost of attendance with a breakdown of direct costs, what's billable to the institution, and indirect expenses, what's needed for a year to succeed at school. Fourth, list gift aid and loans separately, under separate headings. 5, do not include Parent Plus loan or work study as line items in the aid offers. Do not include them in the math as if they are available to be applied to the bill. 6, calculate the student's net cost and estimated bill. Rather than letting students and families have to navigate those waters on their own, let's do the math for them so it's clear. And lastly, guide the way for students to access this aid by including next steps. I look forward to hearing more questions and comments following our presentation. And now I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with Bob.
Thanks, Laura. Very informative. I appreciate the research that you have done and the way you've compiled it and put it together for us. So just waiting for your screen to transition over to mine. Let's see if I can.
Just one moment that has everyone with us that I can share the screen with. So I think I just gave it to you.
Let's see if we can turn that slide, Laura. Here we are. Greetings. Bob Collins, Western Governors University. Just a little background about Western Governors University. It was founded 21 years ago. It's a nonprofit founded by the 19 Western Governors. Today, we have over 100,000 students enrolled, full-time students enrolled, with more than 120,000 graduates in all 50 states. If you think about what the Western Governors were concerned about 20 plus years ago, we offer 60 degrees in 4 colleges for high demand fields: business, teaching, IT, and the health professions. So those are really the 4 fields that our colleges and programs are offered. Our programs are all competency-based. They're all online, and we operate on 6-month terms. We have a unique pricing model where it's $6,500 per year. That's a fixed price, a subscription model, if you will, for all you can learn, for those direct costs, $6,500 per year. So I think, the whole idea of what the governors were concerned about was to create, is to increase access and improve the quality of higher education opportunity for the busy adults. So if you look at our student population, the contemporary, across the nation, in all of higher education, contemporary students are the majority. Recent high school graduates, traditional students are in the minority of those attending college today. So today we have contemporary students. They're over 25 years old, they're employed, they have a family. And what they have are different needs: the flexibility, the access, the affordability, and the ability to leverage their knowledge and skills already acquired from work experience. And they also want the opportunity to advance their career and not just begin or change. While these are, necessary for traditional students, but these are absolute requirements for the non-traditional students, the population that we serve. And many of you do too as well. Here's the WGU student profile. 71% of our students are in one or more of the underserved populations. You'll see those on the right side. The average age of our students, 37 years old. 70% of them receive some type of financial aid. And 35% of the undergraduate students receive a Pell Grant, so the low to moderate income. So this is the student that we serve every day. And it just helps you understand know your demographics, so that when you build these programs, you're there to meet their needs. I share this slide simply because it shows our student-centric model, with the student being in the center. If you look to the left of the student center, the technology, communication, financial aid, program mentors, the light blue shade, that's the student-facing employees and the supports that we provide for the students. The darker blue would be more of the administrative side and the back office operations, with the workforce councils and subject matter experts, and the program development and curriculum, instructional designers and national directors. So these are this is the student-centered approach to Western Governors University. WGU, unlike the more traditional model, we are student-centered, so we have no research requirements or facilities or sports teams, any of that matter. So here's a little bit about our financial aid delivery model. Helps you understand how we deliver financial aid. As I said earlier, we have students starting the first day of every month, regardless of what day of the week it is. So monthly starts the first day of every month. We design and award our financial aid over an academic year. Our academic year is 12 consecutive months. That would be comprised of two 6-month payment periods. We use non-standard terms for those of you in the financial aid vernacular. And in that 2 6-month payment period, you have the tuition and fees, which includes the learning resources. Those are all of the electronic learning materials that the student will need for that term, if you will. It's about $3,250 for that 6-month term. So over 2 terms, over an academic year, it's a fixed price for all you can learn, about $6,500. And that includes all the learning materials, so no out-of-pocket costs for textbooks. When you structure it as such, it really encourages students to accelerate their time to degree completion. right? So if I take 12 credits in 6 months, it's going to cost me $32.50. If I take 15, 18, 24 credits, it's all competency based. It's not dependent on time. It's based on learning. You have the ability to accelerate your time to degree completion without increasing your cost or debt. So I just wanted to give you the history of our RBI program, the Responsible Borrowing Initiatives. It was early 2013. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was promoting a shopping sheet. They had implemented something similar in the housing industry to have a simple plain language shopping sheet, and they worked very closely with the Office of Post-Secondary Education. Because of the rising student debt levels, they were concerned about helping students make an informed decision to borrow wisely. So they drafted the shopping sheet. I'll show you what it looks like here on the next slide. But I really liked the concept. It was really simple. It was plain language. And I thought, this is a really good idea. I think we should do this. And so what we did is we modified the shopping sheet, and you'll see here how and why. But it's personal. It's personal to the student's program of study, to their grade level. We recognized what their aggregate limits are and their annual loan limits. And what we did is we recommend students borrow only what they need. That would be their unmet direct costs. So it was a classic example of behavioral economics, the way we presented the information. It's the choice architecture. It's how small changes in the decision framing can have a significant positive impact. So it's just the way we presented the information. I want to give a shout out to Phil Schuman, our co-chair here of the summit. I just watched a webinar earlier this week or last week maybe on nudge theory. It was a great presentation. If you get a chance, give that recording a view. It's on nudge theory. And they highlight Dr. Richard Thaler from the University of Chicago. I'm a big fan of his. He won the Nobel Prize in economics last year. And his theory is all around behavioral economics. He's a fascinating guy. I'll let you look into that. So here's what the shopping sheet looks like. This is it from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This is their model that they have, where they have the costs, then they have the gift aid, the net costs, work options, loan options separately, and then there's the other options with family contribution. This was a standard shopping sheet. This could not be changed. That would make it a standard, right? The only area where schools had the ability to add something was at the bottom of that page. See that little red circle at the bottom? If you use really small font, you might be able to get 3 sentences in there. That was the only free form area that schools could add some additional information. So that wasn't very helpful because it wasn't, schools objected to this forced approach because it wasn't unique or didn't represent their unique award and types of aid that they wanted to present to their students. And if you look over on the right-hand side, it had this demographic information about the university. It would have the graduation rate, the loan default rate, and the median borrowing. Now that's all well and fine, but the problem that we have with that at Western Governors University is that the graduation rate was for the first-time full-time students, which is not representative of our population. All of our students, nearly 100% of our students have some prior college, and so they're not first-time students. So if you looked at the graduation rate, it was maybe 50, 55 students that were being reported out of 100,000. It wasn't representative of our population. So didn't really appreciate that. It's kind of a misinformation, and it was forced upon us. So I like the concept. One page, simple, plain language, the way they broke it out. So what I did is I modified that shopping sheet, made it a little more user-friendly. Put our logo on there, had an introductory paragraph, put it more into a question and answer format. What will it cost to attend? What will attending WGU cost? So I break out the direct cost, tuition and fees, the indirect cost of meals and housing, books and supplies. And so you kind of frame it so that here's what it costs to attend WGU. Then you say, what am I eligible for? So what we do is present the grants and other aid, just like it did on the shopping sheet, and present the gift aid, if you will. And we also represent what the student's loan eligibility is. Again, Kristen Poindexter is a fake name. And so she would be in a certain grade level to get $6,500 in federal subsidized loans. That would be the maximum eligibility. If you look at the next part, what should I borrow, right? Following that question and answer type of format, we encourage you to borrow as little as possible. Make that bold statement, right? Make them think about it. We do, however, let them know that you can borrow up to the maximum loan eligibility through the federal student loan programs. We would not deny an otherwise eligible student what they are entitled. We recommend that you first borrow no more than your unmet direct costs. So we made that recommendation to students. And if you look at the bottom of this page here, what are my next steps to receive financial aid? You know, I give them clickable links right to their student portal. So that's where they're going to take an action. I've got other financial aid options, you know, that would help students do some additional research. And at the bottom of our page, I had all of these hypertext, all of these links that end in a .gov. So I didn't have to update those. These were all the the National Student Loan Data System and all these other valuable resources that students could find additional information, right? Giving them the tools to understand financial literacy. So what I want to do is just kind of highlight that section where the student has to make a decision. We encourage you to borrow as little as possible. You know, doing the math, while the student might be eligible for $6,500, that's the annual limit for this, for Kristen Poindexter, we recommend she only borrow her unmet direct costs, because our direct costs were $6,070. She got a partial Pell Grant of $2,172. We recommend she only borrow $3,898. And that was our recommendation. That's the way we present it. But again, we would not deny an otherwise eligible student the full entitled amount. So what did we find out? In the first year that we presented this information to the students, this was July of 2013, is 65%, 2/3 of our students accepted our recommendation. It was fascinating. I was excited. I was thrilled, beyond my wildest dreams, that 2/3 of our students would take our recommendation. But if you think about it, we're the experts. They're going to trust us. And so they accepted our recommendation. When you presented to the student what their direct costs are and put it in plain language, 10% of our students realized that they just declined all loans. They figured out that it's affordable. I've got savings. I could pay for it, you know, by other methods. So I was really impressed that 10% of our students declined all loans altogether. Another 3% borrowed less than what we recommended, so they had some resources available. And then another 22% wanted more than what was recommended. So that was really fascinating to see this kind of breakdown. And it really is on the way we presented the information. Not going to lie, you know, many of the continuing students accepted the recommended loan amount initially, and then they called us weeks later and said, hey, where's that excess money that I got last year? I didn't get that this year. So there was a lot of rework, if you will. Students came back, borrowed more because they wanted monies for living expenses. So we learned through that experience is to refine the presentation, to make sure they understand with virtual counseling, if you will, some tools to make sure they understand the actions that they are taking. A lot of our students just click through the boxes as quickly as possible to be done with it without reading everything. Maybe your students do, but not ours. So that was our first iteration. For 3 years, we did that, had some tremendous success. So we wanted to add some more technology into this and create a kind of a gaming, introducing gamification, if you will. So in July of 2016, a couple of years ago, we introduced a student loan scenario calculator, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. But what that does is it presents the full visibility of total student loan debt, including their prior colleges. Remember, 99% or more of our students, undergraduate students, come from prior college and they have prior debt. So we capture that on the ISA record and we present it to the students. So we show them outstanding debt from prior college and what their monthly payments would be. And we just use the standard 10-year repayment terms based on their anticipated graduation date and how much they would have to borrow while at WGU. So it's just kind of a cool tool to present to the student all this robust information. And we present it to them at the time of action when they're about to request a loan amount. So the timing is everything. It's helping them make an informed decision at the time they're making that decision. I know there's probably a dozen states that have annual student debt letter requirements now. And I think that's all well and fine, but the problem is the timing. And it doesn't come at, maybe it comes in the summertime when they're not thinking about school, or it comes too late in the process and they've already accepted a loan amount. So I think that really has made a difference in our presentation. Let me walk quickly through the student loan scenario calculator. You can see this is a student who's had some prior college. They have 120 credits to complete. So this is a 4-year program. They didn't get any transfer credits, but you can see here they did borrow borrowed to date $21,000 from prior college. So didn't have any transfer credits, just as an example. So $21,000 in outstanding balance from prior college. What they would need to do if they just maintain full-time status at WGU, it would take them 10 terms. That would be 5 years. And their monthly loan payment would be $529 when they graduated. So this game gives them the opportunity to turn the dial, slide that bar. What if I took 15 credits per term? Well, I can get done in 4 years. And then I only have to borrow $24,000 at WGU to cover my direct costs. And my monthly payment would then be $467 per month. Wait, well, I can stay heads down. And if I focused and took 18 credits per term, I can get done in 3.5 years. My monthly payment would be $435 per month. And if you looked at the bottom, you'd see that the total interest paid over the life of the loan would be a couple $1,000 savings simply by accelerating their time to degree completion. So that was the next iteration, if you will, is introducing that student loan scenario calculator, more information presented at the right time. So our next iteration is what we call RBI 3.0, working on that in this coming year, in 2019, coming up. We look at the financial literacy as a process, not a product. Certainly there has to be content, but it's actually the timely delivery of that content. The nudge theory, giving the students the information at the time they need to make a decision. So we're introducing some of this concept of nudging. It's also going to include some simple explainer videos. Explainer videos about 45 to 75 seconds in length. Think of it as a little YouTube communication. So with the award letter, and a student got an unsubsidized loan, we would present a simple explainer video that is short, maybe 60 seconds, but it explains unsubsidized loans. So it gives the student another way of hearing and understanding what the award letter includes. So we're looking at probably 10 or a dozen or so of those simple explainer videos and delivering it to students throughout their experience. And the student experience is really important. We think that we can increase our gamification on that student loan scenario calculator to look at more affordable payment plan options. Instead of payment in full at the beginning of the term, we should probably offer a payment plan that offers monthly payments, interest-free monthly payments, right? So I really want to help our students make informed decisions, giving them all the options they have. I'm also going to present to them some external scholarship search engine. So that will help them find some additional free money, some gift aid. And we encourage our students to pay the interest only on their unsubsidized loans, because if you accrue the interest, it's going to increase the total cost of the loan repayment. One way to do this is ask the Department of Education to change the approach on the unsubsidized loan, the master promissory note. Right now, the standard process is for students to accrue the interest on unsub loans, which only increases the total debt. If they opt in, make the student opt in to accrue the interest. In other words, have all unsub loan recipients pay the interest while they're enrolled. Simple business process change, save thousands of dollars. In the time since we've implemented our responsible borrowing initiative, here's the student impact. Academic year 2013, that's July 1, 2012 to June 30, 2013. the average debt of our undergraduate student was just over $21,000 per year. Remember, we implemented our RBI program in July of 2013. So over 5 years, we've been able to reduce the student debt at graduation to nearly $15,000. So that was a 40% reduction in student debt with these simple business process changes. From an institutional impact, here's the cohort default rates for the four-year colleges, our peer colleges. The for-profit is at the top bar. National average is 10.8%. Public four-year, 7.1. The private not-for-profit, 6.6 national average. And WGU is 4.1%. Pretty amazing outcomes for our students. Just in closing, I just want to say that some debt management strategies that we should all adopt, and practice. We don't need any more amplifiers of the problem. 1.5 trillion in student loan debt. We need more communicators of solutions, and that's us. And so we implore you to look at some options in providing these solutions to our students. Help them make informed decisions to borrow wisely, only what you need, not the maximum allowable amount. I think we need to increase the transparency and the visualization with access to the information using gaming technology or artificial intelligence. Chatbots are really popular. And I think the timing has to be succinct, and it has to be at the right time, timing the communication for nudge theory and technology. So with that, here is our final slide, our contact information for me and for Laura. We will open it up to questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Laura and Bob. That was a great presentation. I have a couple questions here, and everybody please feel free to keep submitting questions through the group chat. And also Phil or Brian, if you have any questions, just feel free to jump in as well. So one question I have in regard to that gamification initiative, I don't know if, Bob, you could speak a little bit more about the process to implement that, if you have a timeline or resources to just give us an idea of how much it would take for an institution to implement something like that.
Yeah, we modified the CFPB shopping sheet. I outsourced it, quite frankly. It wasn't our core business. I'm here to, our education is our model, and I wanted to, so I asked a third-party servicer to build this, a software as a service company. I'll give a shout out for them. It's Campus Logic. I asked them, said, look, I got this idea. Can you make this happen? And they did. And so they were able to build that customized shopping sheet. We called it My Financial Aid Plan. And so we presented it to them, and they built it and delivered it to our students on our behalf. Over the 5 years, we've evolved and gotten better, and worked collaboratively with them in partnership, and it's been a great experience. It gets better every year.
Yeah, it's a great tool and super engaging. And as far as data of usage, do you have any numbers on usage and how long do students actually get engaged with the tool or historical data? Yeah,
we have heat maps on all of our Adobe Analytics. Will do the heat maps on where our students click and where they go from there and to there. And yes, we measure everything. We're really data geeks. So we have a lot of that instruct. It's very informative to help us find out where students are getting stuck. Right? They stop right there and they don't take an action. So that helps our technology folks to refine that and do that.
Great, thank you. And then another question. So around campus partnerships, have you or Laura had any experience with collaboration and with other departments in this initiative that you think that would be something that other institutions could also replicate?
I'm going to defer to Laura. Got to unmute, Laura. Not yet.
Okay. So sure, we work with Colorado State University as one example, and we started, to be honest, just looking at their actual aid offer, their award letter. But very quickly, as we started to look at changes, it related back to admissions, it connected with the IT department, it connected with the bursar, et cetera. So this really becomes a systems change effort across the campus. And the director of financial aid there really leveraged his relationships with different departments across campus to find folks to engage. And when we worked with them, we did trainings that involved people from many, many departments, including even some of their partners outside of the institution. So I do encourage that regardless of where the idea comes from, sharing this as a concept, thinking who the right people are who are interested in student-centered communications and beginning conversations that way is a great starting point.
Thanks, Laura. There's a couple questions that are coming in just now. Laura, when your team did the analysis of the award letters, did you look for how many award letters provided details on how to contact the financial aid office, specifics of maybe the phone number, emails, hours, etc.?
Yes, we did. I don't have that raw data on hand. The best in class, I would say, that we saw often involved instructions for the student of how to engage in the portal. That typically students are able to unlock once they decide to go to that institution. That is the behavior that institutions want, is for students to communicate through the portal. So giving that information about the portal address and or logins, and those who named a specific financial aid administrator who's there to help were very strong practices that students also valued when we talk to student groups too.
Great, thank you. And Bob, I was fascinated to see the chart specifically where you show the decline in borrowing since 2013. Do you have, how is that compared to the trend before 2013, since it looks like that's the moment where you implemented some of these initiatives? Was the trend an upward trend?
Yeah, the needle was pointing up. Every year, students were borrowing more and more at undergraduate levels. And so, you know, I present this information across the nation, and remember our demographics. These, for the most part, are working adults. So they have resources to pay their living expenses, did before they came back to school. And so it would not be unusual for them to borrow only what they need to cover their direct costs. It just made good sense. When you present the annual limits to the student, they will take it. If you recommend something different, stop, make them think about it. It really does have an impact.
Thank you. And it looks like we'll have time for just one more question. There was a question around consensus on the best names for the different types of aid. If you found in your research any consensus around that, and how did this play the different programs in the most understandable way?
Sure. So yeah, financial aid overall encompasses many different aspects. Again, really those three types of aid, whether it's money that does not need to be paid back, money paid back with interest over time, or money earned. In terms of the exact terminology, we're continuing to engage financial aid administrators and students and others around terminology. We did do 6 focus groups with students during the research as well. So we're continuing that effort to try to get more consensus in the field. I think that's what I can share right now, but I'm very happy to follow up. If you have more specific questions, feel free to email me.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I will reiterate, there's the emails for Laura and Robert on the screen. So I'm sure that they would be happy to answer any questions. If you have any specific questions, you can reach out to them. We will have the recording of this webinar available to you all. And also I would just like to make a plug for our upcoming webinar, so please stay tuned for a confirmed time, date and time, and it's going to be around promoting financial coaching best practices from the CFPB. So thank you again, Laura and Bob, for a great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing all that you're doing to make sure the students are having responsible borrowing practices.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.